Alrighty, so here we are at our first development project, and I'm actually going to go in and take off draft because these are the requirements for what you need to do for this first development project. And remember, we only have two. Each is worth 25% of your grade, so take it serious. And you have to implement your own concept that you've been writing about now for the last couple of weeks. In the style that you saw Andrew use in the course. So use modules, using standard JavaScript notation of variable declaration and function declaration. And here's the thing I'm going to say about this. Make sure because I've had this happen where students have another programming language they've taken and they try to make JavaScript act and look like that because that's what they know. So don't do that. Use the JavaScript that is being shown here. And if you have no prior experience, make sure you go back, ask any questions that you might have. And this will become even more important when we get down to this code reviews, because you can, of course, come see me before the actual due date. So in this case, it's Wednesday, November 6th, to ask me about that. So that would be fine. But just more than anything, what I want you to know is don't use a programming style of another language. Use JavaScript's programming style. Okay, so you have to implement the 4 commands in your app. And these are the yard commands that we set up. They are basically CRUD applications. So create, read, update, and delete. They fall into these categories. Obviously, you can name them whatever you want. Store your data in a JSON file and add some additional functionality above what Andrew showed us in his notes. So I'm going to show you a couple examples today of what this might look like. And just know that you can either add additional JavaScript functionality in different places, or at least a couple of places, or you can also just add additional output, which you will see I did a little bit of both today. And just to be clear, code reviews are a required part of this work. If you write code, and I talked about this in attendance last time, and I had one question only about this, but I just want to go over this again. If you write code that does all the things listed, above and it should be do not do a code review. Let me change that. So even if you write you get your code working fine, but you don't come in for a code review, and do not come in for a code review, then you lose 50% of the possible points. So bringing code that does not function, right, depending on the level errors that you have here, could also subject you to 50% off. And then here's the thing is you will, and I'll show you this right now, when you reserve your session, you can either do it online or you can do it face-to-face. So here are the date and times that I'm going to start. If you had code ready, and I'm recording this before the week before, so you could reach out to me anytime really if you want me to look at some code and give you general ideas, or have a session with me that talk about specific things you're trying to accomplish. But here are so Monday 2, Tuesday 2, 4 on Wednesday, and then several on Thursday. But just know that this is after the due date. Okay, so you still need to turn your code in on Wednesday night by midnight. And the nice thing about doing these code reviews before the due date is that you can actually modify anything that we found during your session. Okay, so just know that it's better to do it here. I do have a little bit of flexibility on Wednesday, so if you're trying to get in to see me on Wednesday, email me and I will see when I could work that out. But on Tuesday I don't, and on Monday I don't. So okay, so the other thing is you put your name in here and you say the kind of meeting. So it shows here these can either be online or face-to-face. If they are online, I will send you an email telling you what I need from you to set that up. And it's basically your Gmail address, and give you some other like helpful tips to get that done if you've never done a Hangout session with me. Okay, I think I've gone over all the requirements. So now I'm just going to look at the code that I wrote. I did take, and this is an important part, I did take what I had shown in the email app for, I keep trying to roll up the modules. I did take what I had done, must have done that when I copied them, for the Learn Together week 3. And I added some additional pieces of functionality to it. And here's the key. You want this up in your private repo under a directory called dev. And this first one is dev_0. And then, of course, the next one will be 1. So as far as the app goes, right, this is really just where we're setting up Yarg. So for my setup, right, I'm going to do a send. I have to have 3 pieces of information. For my inbox, I just need the email address. For the read command, I just need the ID, right? And then for the trash, I needed the ID, and I added, this is one of the things I added was email address, and this got me thinking down a rabbit hole of that I could only delete emails that were sent to me. But then I started thinking about really in a real email system, when you send email, it actually ends up both in your inbox or your email database and the receiver's email database. But I decided rather than to think too hard about that to squash my brain, I would just at least add that you can only delete email that you have actually received and not that you sent, because that would delete it for the receiver. Again, one of those things that doesn't exactly match what we know about email, but it works. So in my email file at the beginning, and by the way, because I didn't require a validator and chalk and all those things, and that's an important piece, is like if you're not using something, make sure you delete it. If you have code in here that is from you playing around, make sure you delete it. Do give at least 1-line comments about what that block is doing. That's one of the things I'll look at. And so in here, I set up some chalk variables so I could easily just do green text, blue text, white text. And then the load email was really no different than what Andrew showed, because it didn't have to be. You will name it whatever is specific for your application. In this case, I ended up just creating a few output messages when the load happens. And then on the save email, similar thing, I outputted a message showing how long it was so I could just tell the user some basic details. And this is what I talked about last time, where when I actually go to create, or in this case, send a new email, I'm going to have each of those entries have an index. And so I did what I would consider to be kind of the easy way to do an index, but there is definitely, and again, we learned this, and you're welcome to use the UUID from 93 if you like. And that's because for me, again, I'm going to reiterate this from my last week's video, but in my email system, I wanted the user to be able to send email subject lines that were that could be duplicated, unlike what Andrew did in his note app, is he didn't want to have his notes have a duplicate title. I found that for my content, my concept, and really for email in general, that wouldn't be true, right? So knowing that I would allow duplicate, in this case, subject, I needed to think about a way I would grab individual email addresses. So you'll have to think about this and, think it through how you're going to store the data. So for me, because I was going to allow duplicates, I needed a way to grab them. So I set up a simple email ID. And then what I did is passed in whatever was the current email listing. And if it was 0, then I just returned 1. So that was the first one. Else, I actually looked at the length -1 as the last one. And then I just added email.last, right? And then created that last email. Oh, sorry. I actually did length -1, right? So length of whatever it is, -1 gives me the last entry. And then I pulled off the ID of what EID for whatever was the last one. And I added 1 to it by returning it. So I needed that right here when I actually went to send email, right? So for sending email, and again, remove any console logs you were just playing with, which in this case, that's the other thing about using the debugging tools, but I won't go down that rabbit hole right now. So in this case, I said, if the email of the sender is valid, and if the email of the receiver is valid, then I'll go ahead and push that object into the file, or sorry, not into the file yet, because remember, that's what happens down here, but into the email list that is in memory right now. So in this case, I also added a status as of a default of new. For all emails, which kind of makes sense because if it's the first time, they'd be new. And then I saved the emails, which I already showed you that. And then I outputted some text saying it was successfully sent to the sender and the receiver. Now, the reason I did, in this case, this else here was I wanted a different message based on if it was the receiver or the sender email. That's why I didn't just do an and or an or, is I actually nested the if so I could output a different message for if either of those conditions. So then in my inbox, inbox is just a reading of the email. I load the email, and then if the email being sent in is valid, then I get email sent and email received by filtering on that for each one, the email for S email and R email. Then I outputted some text only if I found some content. Okay, otherwise I'd just say no email received. And then the idea is if you have email using a truthy value, and truthy just means here that there was something stored in that result of a filter on the array. And then on the read, I just did by ID. And then I changed the status. If it was an N, I changed it to an R. And then here's where I did a little more here, where I actually, let me come back up here. I didn't talk about this. So I loaded the email, then I find email by ID, where I did an actual find. And then I said, if it found something, right? Then I said, I found the index of that particular one. So this is actually an example of additional functionality above what we found. So this is my read operation. Okay. So again, what I did is I found the specific one that by that ID. Then if I did find something, then I got the index of that one. And then I reached into the email file and I said, if the status is equal to an N, then set email, find that particular one status to R. Because in this case, you could have one that was already R and it would just drop through and not do anything in that case. Okay. So then I just outputted the whole email that was found. And then on the trash, I already talked about this where I added the email, but I didn't show you the code. So first thing I did, similar thing where I find the email, I find the index, and then and actually I got to do this because I actually think in doing this, I realized it wasn't returning the index. And actually I realized that above, it was actually returning the whole thing when I did a find the whole, in this case, entry. Okay. So, and then I said, if it's equal to whatever the inbound is, only when that's true is that it's the receiver, you received it. And that's where I was talking about before, is I only want to delete if it was the receiver's email matched what was in there. Okay. And then I just did the filter by email to say emails to keep, then saved those and output some content according to the condition. And then I exported these modules, these commands out, right? Oh, actually, thank you. This actually just realized I don't need to save. These two do not need to be exposed to the outside. All right, so you want to think about that. Only these commands, right? My CRUD commands. So my send is the create. My read actually is in this case, read is actually the update. And that's what I said. You can name them whatever you want. What we will look at during code review is that you actually did the function of actually doing an update. And then trash was a delete. Okay, so that's my code. And then coming back over here, the thing that I want you to know about code review is that first thing you have to do is show me that it works. I will actually download your code before you get into code review, but we will actually see, does your code work? Run through a couple examples, and then what you will do is describe to me your code. So that is an important thing to practice on, is once you get code working or while you're writing it, make sure you can describe it, because that's really an important part of code review, is for you to be able to describe that code. And then if we have enough time, we'll actually talk about areas that I might see that you could improve this code. So you could have working code that still could absolutely have improvements. That's what iteration is for. So just know, but the important part is you bring working code, we actually see it function, you walk me through your code, describing it in a detail that you should know based on what we've been through so far. All right, I know that's a lot, but I at least wanted to give you, so you have a good idea of what to expect. The important thing is, looking at this list, is that the sooner you get on it, the better. And remember that if you're coming to see me any of these days, you can still modify some of your code. It is due Wednesday night, so these are after. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.